The Australian Council for Student Voice acknowledges the traditional custodians of the unceded lands, skies, and waterways on which we live, work, and learn. We pay our deepest respects to elders past and present and honour the enduring knowledge, strength, and cultures of First Nations peoples. For over 65,000 years, they have cared for country, its lands, skies, and waters, since time immemorial. We especially recognise the leadership and voices of First Nations young people. As young people across these lands continue to advocate for treaty and healing, we commit to listening deeply, learning continuously, and standing in solidarity. We acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and we remain committed to a future grounded in truth, justice, and reconciliation.
Thanks, folks. Looks like we've got Nick from Somerville in Victoria, and Cobra's joining us from Uganda. We've got Carmel from Tassie and Shari from Queensland. So thanks again for joining. I do want to start with an acknowledgement of country. You guys can see my slides? Yes, cool. So I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the unceded lands on which we gather from. I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation tonight, and I acknowledge their elders past and present, and honour the enduring connection to country of First Nations people. So we'll be together for around 45 minutes tonight. We're going to have some discussions about our framework, really designed to be interactive. So it's going to be nice and fun. Feel free to contribute in the chat or, unmute yourself and go. Feel free to interrupt me as we go through it. I'll start by acknowledging the many people who've contributed to this work. The folks who have agreed to be listed here and those who haven't as well. They've really helped us to make this work possible and represent their views throughout the process. So I'll start with a provocation for us. Is this a good example of student voice? What do you think? Got a casual clothes day poster, the gold coin donation for charity run by the SRC.
Can I go for it?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. I have one reason why I agree with this, because I'm seeing that it will be collaborative, and sometimes collaborative sessions really work for students because it's like they are feeling themselves. Those who decide to join, they are like doing what they are really loving. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Would we agree?
I think there might be some element of some student voice in there. If you've got the Student Representative Council that's running the event, but it depends on what you would sort of classify as student voice. Like if it's a collective of, the event on its own, perhaps not, but the discussion around it. Like how it got to that point, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, Katrina's popped in the chat that student voice has changed. SRCs are steering away from charity events and more about leadership building skills. Cool. This is sort of what I was trying to get at. It is, I guess, in some aspects, good example, but also maybe not. It is hard to gather from the information you've got there with just the poster. But it's a lot of what we've been thinking about is what does a good example look like? So, what are students doing? What's the process? Where does the power sit in all of that? And it leads me to my next question, which is what is tokenism? Something we've been discussing as part of this work. Do you have any immediate thoughts about how you would categorize tokenism? Yeah, Shari's just popped in the chat when student voice might be sought, but not acted upon in a meaningful way. And Carmel's written student participating in decisions that have already been made, surface level roles, making the posters, etc., but not being a part of the process. Yeah, I think that is very close, exactly what we have been talking about as part of this. Students are involved in symbolic ways without influence. The teacher makes the decision and then leads the students through a process that makes them think that they're making the decision, these kind of things. And in a previous workshop, someone mentioned it was quite like, I don't know if anyone's seen Utopia. There's a bit on, they do some consultations with Tasmania about what they want built. And a stadium isn't one of them, and that's the one the government goes for. That was an example of what it might look like. And it's often when we see the shinier students involved. The school captains speaking for all students. But I don't want to just criticize. Informing the work that we've done has been about recognizing where tokenism does occur, and then how we can move from tokenism to better examples of involving students. So to run you through what we've done, I know Shari and Katrina, you probably heard this before, but we did an initial consultation in developing our framework that asked if this work was needed and what it might look like. And that went out to our community. And the responses from that informed our research focus, where we looked at quite a few examples of what is student voice. And that culminated in version 1 of our framework. We then took that and we tested it in a series of consultations that informed version 2. And our last stage was doing some targeted consultations with only students and young people to test version 2 of the framework and build a really strong version 3. So we moved from a very theoretical and abstract version into something that's quite practical. And this is our framework for those who haven't seen it before. It's quite complex when you get into the nitty-gritty, but also simple as well. And we do have a student-friendly version that accompanies it in the documentation. So I'm going to run you through, just pop back here, the different elements of the framework quickly. And then we're going to have a bit of a chat about applying them in context. So to start with the guiding principles, we've got authenticity. So this is first up as it's the highest priority in these guiding principles. So empowerment must be genuine. Students need to feel that their voices matter, and that starts with trust, building intentional relationship, and recognizing who the students are for their own lived experiences. Next is cultural and contextual responsiveness. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. This framework and any student voice work, just because it works in one setting, might not work in another. Schools are all different, and the cultural and the socially and the contextual experience at each school is different and needs to be taken into consideration. Collaborative and inclusive partnerships is next. So students and educators and families, all of the different stakeholders need to come together because they all have a role. They've got equity and inclusion. So it's about actively breaking down barriers, things like assumptions, access issues, systemic inequalities, these things that prevent students from participating fully. And then sustainability and responsibility. So empowerment can't just be a once-off, needs to be long-term, have structures in place that support this work. And last but not least, student-centered. So students have to be at the heart of everything, decisions, policies, and cultures. Now, I generally describe these principles as a compass. So it's not a checklist, but something that guides your direction and helps you stay accountable as you go through this work. Next up in the framework is definitions. When you read through the definitions in the framework, you'll notice that we talk a lot about power. And that's something that was really key for us to acknowledge that, within the system that we exist within, students don't hold a lot of the power. And some adults are unwilling to give up that power. And that's a challenge that we face. So first up is voice. So it's about students being heard, but not just given a chance to speak, but listened to. And as part of this, adults need to create safe and inclusive spaces and act on what students share and what they don't share as well. We've also got agency. So students have choice and control. They're setting goals, making decisions, and seeing their actions have real impact. We've also got advocacy. So students standing up for what matters, be that for themselves or for others or for wider causes. And adults support them to amplify their efforts through things like skill building and working with them to address systemic issues. And finally is partnership. So students and adults need to work together. It's about co-creating decisions, policies, and initiatives with mutual respect. Key here is a level of shared accountability and recognizing students as equal contributors. And finally, the conditions that strengthen. So we've got communication. Students need clear, honest, and two-way communication. It's about being informed about their decisions, including how and why they're made, building trust and respect. We need authenticity and identity. So it's about genuine recognition, not just being performative. So it's not just a tick the box consultation. Schools need to consistently honour students' diverse identities, not just during special events, and they should feel safe to be themselves and know that who they are is valued. Meaning and belonging is next. So empowerment is stronger when students feel part of a community. A sense of belonging makes students more willing to collaborate, take initiative, and lead. And finally, purpose and impact. So students need to see how their involvement matters. When goals are clear and outcomes are visible, students are more engaged and motivated to contribute. So that is the framework. Thanks for listening to me ramble. We're going to do a quick activity discussing sort of where voice agency, advocacy, and partnerships currently exist in your school. Now, I know 2, if not 3 of you aren't in schools at the moment, but that's okay. We can talk more generally. Let me just open up this whiteboard.